Hey, hello, and welcome to the Feel Strong Fitness Podcast. My name is Justin McClintock, and this week we have Dr. Erin Farmer returning to the podcast. Dr. Farmer is a physical therapist who specializes in pelvic health and has developed a private practice treating weightlifters and athletes who have pelvic floor issues. This was a great conversation. We dig into the connection between pelvic health and chronic pain. There's more there than you first might think. We discuss the challenges and rewards of private practice, the importance of integrity in healthcare, and why individualized and functional approaches to physical therapy often lead to the best results. We talk about minimum effective dose training, assessing, progressing exercises, and the importance of patience and curiosity working one-on-one with individuals. This was a tremendous conversation. I think you'll get a lot from it. Dr. Erin Farmer is on the Feel Strong podcast. Dr. Erin Farmer, welcome to the Feel Strong podcast.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
I am happy to have you back. You're a returning guest, one of the rare returning guests to the podcast.
Yeah, so you know that I didn't hate it the first time.
Also fair. We also, it seemed a natural fit, I thought, for a couple of reasons. One, you just passed 1 year in practice. Is that correct?
This is true. 1 whole year doing all the things.
And you're in our Philly local health, fitness, wellness pros category also. So multiple reasons to bring you back.
Yeah, thank you. I sound really fancy when you put it like that.
You are pretty fancy. And you also, I think, have defined already in only a year, which is a very long time and no time at all, depending on which side of it you're standing on. But I think you've already defined some really cool niches in what you do. Would you, if someone asked you, oh, you're a physical therapist, like, what do you do? What's your answer?
I feel like if we're talking about niches, the thing that I am most suited to do is to help people who are dealing with pelvic floor related issues and are also weightlifters. So people who are either weightlifters in the context of CrossFit or weightlifters in the context of doing competitive weightlifting. Those are just the things that I know the most about, but I also treat a fair amount of rugby players and also people who do Muay Thai. This is another couple little niches that have just ended up being more the people that have walked through my door. And honestly, anybody who treats pelvic health is treating chronic pain. So a lot of like low back pain that people have had on and off for years. That is my main wheelhouse. That's the majority of the people that I see and the majority of what I talk about, learn about, love to treat, that kind of thing. Yeah. So that's in a gist what I'm up to lately.
That's very cool. I want to, before I double back on something, would you speak a little more about why anyone who is doing pelvic floor work is necessarily also doing chronic pain work?
Yeah. So pelvic health is a complicated component of physical therapy. I feel like the best answer to that question is really just the type of patient that I end up seeing. Many of the people that I see are people who have had low back pain for a long time and have never had pelvic floor physical therapy, and then end up coming to pelvic floor PT at the suggestion of either their medical professional or of a friend, which is a lot more often what I see. So it's almost like the place where things are, it's a last resort, which is, it's unfortunate that that's the case, but most back pain studies show that even if you do nothing within 6 to 8 weeks, you'll kind of be back to your normal functional self. That doesn't mean that you're like back in the gym doing every single weight that you ever did before. But for the most part, most back pain, 6 to 8 weeks, you're back to functioning. For people that have like long standing resurgences of that type of pain, it is often something related to pelvic floor because the pelvic floor is like the cornerstone of your body, right? It's involved in everything that we do. It's involved in breathing, something we do all day long, 20,000 times a day. So I feel like that's why the connection from chronic pain to pelvic health exists, is because that is often the way, that's often a connection that we see, including a lot of people who have chronic inflammatory diseases or have been through highly stressful periods of life. It is this weird wing of physical therapy, which most physical therapy takes into account, the whole person, but pelvic health is often many of the diagnoses have a lot to do with someone's mental health as well. So also something that's chronic, right? Your mental health is something that's like ongoing, definitely not like, usually like, oh, I just like did this one exercise and now I'm better, So pelvic health works very similarly.
Is there a reason you think, I agree with everything you just said. I mean, you're right, but I also know you're right. And given that pelvic floor health is so important and can affect so many different aspects of someone's life, activity, function, etc., why, and I'm being slightly hyperbolic here, but I think a lot of people have this experience, why have I only heard about it in the last 10 years?
Yeah, so pelvic health has been around for a really long time. I mean, not relative to other subspecialties of physical therapy, but it's been around long enough. I think there's a lot of things going on. I think one of the things is that it's not actually standard of care. So standard of care for something like post-op knee surgery is going to PT, and there's usually like a recommended dosage. So no matter who you are and where you're getting your knee surgery, this is like gonna happen to you if you're getting knee surgery. The same does not happen for things like birth. The same does not happen even for things like cesarean birth, which is an operation which one could argue has the same recovery time as a major knee surgery. And obviously the person on the other end has more responsibilities, blah, 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 blah. So yeah, I'm not really sure why that is, but I feel like some of the biggest reasons are it's not conventional standard of practice right now. And that's something that a lot of people within pelvic health are working on. I think the other thing is that these are just topics that people don't like to talk about, right? Like we don't like to be like, we can be like, oh, my back hurts a little bit. My foot, I sprained my ankle, but you don't want to be like, well, I had a baby and now I haven't had a normal poop in so long. That's not everyone's favorite topic of conversation. Pelvic floor therapists also treat pain with sex and complications with that kind of thing as well, which clearly people aren't just like running around and like grabbing a cup of coffee and telling their friends immediately about, not normally. But it does happen lately, which I love because the more that my patients talk about the relief that they get, the more that I'm able to kind of get a broader reach and see more people who, don't have to be living with what they're living with. I think those are the biggest reasons. There's also a little bit of a desert in Philly as far as like access to care. So if you were to kind of head to Penn or Jeff or some of these like larger systems, it's tough to get into them. They have really long waiting lists because there's fewer pelvic health therapists working. And I actually started in a conventional PT setting doing pelvic health. And that conventional setting is built off of a model that only makes money when there's like 2 to 4 patients in an hour, which is impossible for people who are treating pelvic health. You can't be dealing with the kind of trauma or the kind of minutia that like we have to be looking at someone when they're doing almost every single thing that they're doing and treating 4 people at the same time for pelvic health. That's just not possible. And so people within my own wing of like conventional PT practice, the entire pelvic health staff walked out within like 2 months. So that has also created this situation where access to the care itself is limited. So I think that's one of the other contributing factors.
That makes total sense. That's so, I mean, I've heard that business model complaint from lots of physical therapists, both current and former physical therapists who are in the, 4 and with sort of more standard physical therapy, 8+ people sometimes in a room with, 2 assistants rounding and kind of observing stretching. And it's only a business model argument. No one comes down and says, this is effective or efficient or a good way to do things. But it's just, we need to be billing 8 people at once or we have to close our doors. That's simply the way it works. But once you factor, I mean, just the idea of potential internal exams seems to throw all of that, seems to make it completely impossible.
It's super gross. But when we were in the throes of like,
oh no, what are you going to say?
No,
please, I want to hear it.
We were like, what do you want us to do? Like draw a curtain and then like one hand in each, like I don't, that was a little crass. Sorry, everybody. But it's a thing, and more or less that was our argument. Like literally, what do you expect us to do? It's impossible. But yeah, that's a tough part of the current model of physical therapy. It's one of my struggles in being in private practice is really wanting this care to be accessible, but knowing that, I don't take insurance. I'm a cash-based PT. I can super bill people, but everybody's insurance is different. And most of the time it's not great, but access to care is so important to me. So yeah, it's a point of just frustration for a lot of physical therapists out there, I think. And it's a constant goal of mine to figure out how to do that better for everyone's sake.
Yeah, it's really hard, but the answer isn't underpay, burn down, and have physical therapists not doing good work for people.
Yeah.
Because then everybody loses.
Yeah.
Not unlike the way that we run Feel Strong, not to draw too close a parallel, but my argument, whenever someone comes and says, you're really expensive, I say, yeah, I know. And then I often get the access question. I often get how are you going to do this? I say, well, you don't know about the people I scholarship or subsidize, and I'm not going to tell you about it. And that's not on the table for you. You're not in that pool of people. But if I do good work effectively and efficiently for these people, 95% of the people, then I have the option of giving it away to whatever degree I want to in other contexts, and volunteering and mentoring other coaches who can do this kind of work and that kind of stuff. Which, is it the perfect solution? No, but it moves the needle forward, and lots of people are getting good work along the way.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that one of the beauties of the way that both training and PT environments have expanded with access to the internet and social media is that there's a lot of information out there. And I do think it can be really overwhelming, but I think it's all the more reason to pin yourself to people that are doing really good work and showing that. And when I first became a coach, that is how I learned. I learned by reading articles, watching other people, trying things on my own. And I think there's this big expectation about there being a mysterious coach in the sky who's going to make your body make sense. And that's what you've been missing all along. And I do think that certain coaches are going to see you a lot more clearly and have more experience that's going to help you. But at the end of the day, as a patient and as a client, you are responsible for your own wellness, and you know your body more than anybody. So you have to take responsibility of being a good scientist and trying things out and seeing what works and seeing what doesn't. And there are levels, just like you were explaining, to which you could receive that help pretty much no matter what economic issue you are having. But it is hard. It is really tough.
Yeah. Now, I feel that from both the provider / in my instant coach side and the business owner side.
Yeah.
I have responsibility to keep the lights on. I have people who are counting on me and making a living. And this actually has to work as a business, as well as the virtuous reasons that I'm trying to do it for.
Yeah. It is funny because one of the things that is really popular in conventional PT, I'm not trying to say that I got told to keep people unwell, but I definitely got told if you can get people in 3 times a week, you should do it. And I feel that's insane because people have children, some of them. And one of the things that is kind of interesting about the cash-based model is I don't have to see people that often. So I could see people 2 times a week if they really wanted to, but I more often see people 1 time a week. And I love this because it allows me to kind of touch base and see what's going on. But then there's already this inherent independence that's being built because I'm saying, I want you to go away now and try these things on your own and work on your own. I trust you to do this, and then come back and we'll see if we want to change these things, advance these things. Maybe you need some manual therapy, but in my mind, this is the model. This is how it should have been, but it's tough because obviously there's a lot still transitioning, but yeah, important to guard everyone's wellness, I think. And this is the way to do it.
Well, and to be clear, I'm going to slightly restate what I think you just said, and I'm going to miss a little bit, so get ready to correct me. But you aren't in the position where you're getting a prescription that this patient is coming for 3 times a week for the next 12 weeks. And you're like, all right, I guess we're doing that. We're going to figure out what we're doing for 3 times a week. You get people coming to you with the complaint, maybe a referral from someone like me, maybe their own. You assess them, determine what they need, and then they get that. And it might be they need to see you 2 or 3 times a week. But a lot of times, especially with the clientele you're working with, especially with the CrossFitters, weightlifters, Muay Thai, rugby people, a lot of them are very competent movers, very competent trainers, pretty good direction followers once they, assuming they trust you. And you can say, oh, you need me for the manual therapy. I want to review at least once a week, but you can go do this, the rest of this on your own. And I'm giving you what you need with the intent being autonomy and independence, not, well, I have to get these 36 billable sessions out of you or the thing doesn't work.
Yeah. And I mean, it's funny because I have the bias of my practice is certainly that I do have people who are more well-versed in movement, but I have had people who like, they're just starting out, and I have been able to make it work, like I have had people who are older, for instance, and a little bit like technologically challenged. That's not the easiest, but you just change what you give people, right? Like you know that the entry level for them is just going to be a little different. The only population that probably is not in that wheelhouse is post-op. So people who have a real need for manual work to actually be moving the needle on things like range of motion post actually having a pretty major operation. But that's not the people who are ending up in PT. The people who are ending up in PT are often like, I have pain. It's been here forever. I don't know what to do about it. And I think people seek out coaching now for the same reason. And that's something that I've found to be really interesting in the last maybe 10, 15 years of knowing people from that end is a lot of people just don't trust PTs anymore. And that's a shame. But I'm kind of like, look, if the profession is not changing things that matter to people, then I'm all for coaches stepping in. And I think especially coaches that are able to grow their knowledge, work in conjunction with medical professionals, there's so much potential for them to do really good for a lot of people who are in that same position. Can't find a good PT. Yeah, but it's got to be frustrating for everybody all around.
Of course. And especially people, one of the things that jumps out about the sort of specialties that you outlined, the Muay Thai, the CrossFitters, the weightlifters, the rugby people, they're all people who are really used to being banged up and sore a little bit, right? They're okay with that.
Yeah.
Depending on what level they do it at, of course. But a lot of those people are like, yeah, I'm feeling something. They go on a 2-week vacation. They come back and they're like, is this what healthy feels like? Oh my goodness. I haven't been here for a while. But those are also the people, because of that, are looking for providers who can help them and aren't going to say, oh, you shouldn't squat. Oh, you shouldn't run. Oh, you shouldn't you should really swim and take this TheraBand home. And that's the rest of your life, because they're not going to do it.
Yeah. No.
Even if that was the right answer, and it so rarely is, they're not going to do it anyway. So why don't we help people actually reach their goals, which I think is where you're spending a decent amount of your time.
Yeah. And I think the more I feel like this is true within coaching as well, but good coaches and good PTs are always in context, right? So you're looking at your client or your patient, and yes, you might think that this person needs, A, B, C, D, all these exercises, but there is always the reality of what they're actually going to do, which I feel like physicians they don't deal with that. So they don't always know that's going to happen. And it's just tough on both ends, but yeah, it's tricky. But I love that private practice gives me the opportunity to really make that call. And I don't feel like there's a larger PT business that's oh my God, you need to get people in for, 17 visits every month and that kind of thing. There's an inherent integrity around it, which I feel is very fitting with my personal values. And it's really nice. And you know what? I think it works financially and business wise, because people, it turns out, really will come back to you if they ever get hurt again, if you didn't try to swindle them. So that seems to be helping as well.
Yeah. But if you don't need 25 brand new clients every month, not that we want people to be hurt, but people, especially very active people, are going to get banged up.
Yep.
And then if you're great, I saw you for whatever, an average number of sessions are and got your thing. Hey, I think we're good. High five, get out of here, tell your friends. And they do.
Yeah.
And then 3 years later, they come back and they set 3 other people to you, and you have a reputation as someone who does good work. So when someone else in their active, community gets hurt, they say, oh, you should see Dr. Erin. No. She will get you back to rugby. I had to stop for a couple weeks and I came back, but it's okay. She's not going to tell you that you can't do this anymore.
Yeah. And it is a goal always to be let's see, right? I don't have a crystal ball. I can't tell people what is going to work forever. At some point, there may be movements that we can't really do anymore, like when you're 90. But yeah, generally, like I think one of the hardest things for me as a clinician is when I do have to get to the point where I'm like, the bony situation here tells me like some of these movements are out of your reach. But I think one of the beauties of what I get to do then is say, well, what's in your reach? Because otherwise, this person is going to be told to do nothing. I have a mother who I've been working with for a while who has pretty significant breakdown of cartilage in one of her knees. And we've sort of got to the point where it's like, all right, some of these movements that we've wanted to do just are not going to work for you. And that's really okay. That's like a good place to be. But what she got told in her physician's office was like, you should just probably never like kneel or squat or work out with weights ever again, which is just not true. And also ridiculous because she has a toddler, What's she gonna do? Not pick up her toddler. Yeah, it's literally impossible. And unfortunately, the way that the system goes, that's what people get told. And people post back surgery, for instance, get told like, oh, you're on precautions. You can never lift anything more than 15 pounds. Well, groceries get pretty heavy and life requires groceries. So like, I don't know how people are navigating that. So yeah, it's been cool to get to the point where I've been able to do both. I've been able to say to some people who are like, I thought I would never snatch again, and we can snatch, right? But it's also really good to get to the point where I can, as a clinician, kind of be like, yes, not everything is within our reach. It's okay sometimes to admit that like life is going to have to take a different turn. But in that life, everyone gets to be active. Everyone gets to work towards what's functional for as long as possible. That we never want to put a limit on, right?
I feel like that's a very nuanced no, right? Can I snatch? Yeah. And the answer isn't you shouldn't weightlift. It's, well, hold on, let's see. And we do some assessment and we do some work and we try and move toward that. And if you get to the point where you say, actually, because of X, Y, and Z and these orthopedic considerations, I think that the risk reward is way out of kilt here. I don't think this is a movement for you. By the time you get there, you've built so much trust and so much credibility that the patient is likely, they may not be happy, but I suspect they agree with you. They say, we've done all these things. We've tried, it's not for lack of, this is just the way that I'm built right now. But look at all these other things I can do to be active, to move forward, to, keep feeling useful and functional and all of those things.
Yeah. I think the other fine line that I'm like finding I have to navigate lately is, I think, as you know, that I do obviously in-person PT. I also do like in-person training that's with a PT. So that's nice if anything comes up or if you have a kind of like chronic condition that it requires that. But I do have patients who it's tough because I'm trying to move them back into the classes that they wanted to do, right? Because as a PT, our goal is always like, what is it that the patient wanted to do? And I think this is true for coaches too. Like, what is the actual goal? Keep the goal the goal. And I'll get some people who, because CrossFit classes can still be very like, like bull in a china shop sometimes. Like, it's just the nature of the thing, right? There are going to be movers who that's harder to access. And so I've had to walk that line lately, kind of being like, in my world of training lately, bilateral movement, doing things like squats, deadlifts, it's tough because those movements sort of inherently require dependence on a certain degree of symmetry. And if you don't have that symmetry, whether because of, your own like hypertrophy, muscle layout, whatever, bony structure, whatever, it's just really likely that you're going to keep re-injuring yourself if you keep doing things bilaterally. But I can't say to someone who wants to go back to CrossFit, like every time someone squats or deadlifts forever in a workout, do it on one leg. I mean, I've tried. It just doesn't feel very good. So, but that kind of situation does occasionally happen. And I have been looking and have loved programs within the city. And I think you're another example of someone who I've referred to in those instances. For someone who can provide fitness in a format that is fun, but not, abiding by these like external rules, which is sort of what CrossFit is, right? CrossFit said, like, if you prop your heels up while you squat, therefore it's no longer a great squat, and that's just not true. And things like that, like if you're not doing a full on workout and getting sweaty every single time, then you're clearly not fit, and that's not true either. So that line has been interesting lately. Like, I love CrossFit. It's my roots. I want CrossFit to work for people for as long as it can, but there are limitations, especially in a class format. And it's tough. It's tough to like get to that point or have that conversation with someone, but it is a thing.
It is. I navigate that all of the time, both with the people who want that taste of intensity and they want to be able to just go. Yeah. And you have to say, there's lots of stuff we can go on, right?
Yeah.
For this hypothetical person, like, you can go on a fan bike as hard as you want and you're going to be okay. That's not true with a snatch. Like, that's not true with you probably should never do a butterfly pull up. We're not going to the games. It's going to be okay. And that combination of movement mixed with the intensity that you want and that class format is designed to bring out is actually a bad idea for you. So can we work on your imbalances and single limb strength and, time under tension over here, and then design things, and as much variety as creativity will allow, but a slightly different movement selection, and then removing those artificial standards, which were put in place so 7 billion people could understand what a program is, but definitely wasn't designed for you. Like, Dr. Erin should be squatting way below parallel because her mobility is amazing. If you just, tucked below parallel, that would actually not be good for you. Maybe for competition it would, but it's not effective for your fitness. And there's other people who shouldn't be squatting to parallel because they're certainly not effective through that range of motion.
Yeah. I had this conversation actually with a patient this morning. This is a person who has failed pelvic floor PT 3 times. It's insane. And when I say failed, basically like has urinary incontinence and pretty profound, pretty like, making function hard on a daily basis, and had done all kinds of treatments in many different settings. And I say all that because yay, now they're like doing a little hopping and we're like able to run down the street and not pee ourselves. It's really great. But this person is really motivated by people. And so I've been really looking for like an activity option that's going to be in a group format, that's going to support the strength training that I think she continues to need, but also allow for there to be some kind of motivation. And we were talking today, because what we've been doing to practice is I've been taking movements from the Collider program at Open Box, which is their like sub-step down from CrossFit as far as like intensity.
A non-barbell CrossFit program.
Exactly. And I've been taking that format and I've just been like peppering in some like corrective pieces along with like bumping up the intensity of doing some of those other like dumbbell movements. And it's working really well. But today she was telling me she was having so much trouble with a sit-up, right? So there were like, 50, 40, 30, 20, 10 sit-ups. And I think people think like sit-up and they think like, how hard can that be? I sit up out of bed. But actually, just yesterday, I had 2 people who were like large men with great deadlifts who could not do a single sit-up. So I was showing her this band-assisted version, not super complicated to understand. Just put a band in front of you, use it to help you sit up. And she was saying, I guess this is a movement that like people just shouldn't do quickly. And it was like yeah, I know. And it was like a really good noticing, right? Because it was like, yeah, kinda like you can introduce some intensity there and it's okay. But like a lot of people are not going to feel great. And if you're at the level where you're having to scale your sit up, like, I don't know if intensity is the right time for you to, that's not the right time to introduce that, right? It's kind of wild how those concepts do not come up for anybody until you're just like training and doing things. That's the only way to learn this stuff. And I'm not surprised that it's terribly overwhelming for patients and clients when they think like, well, I'm in a class, here I go. And then just like wailing on their lower backs because why not? And like, it's tough. But I think Philly has some great resources, and it's obviously one good way to find out about them.
Well, I would hope so. And there's, I feel like in the group class format, there's also, I end up with a lot of people who are reasonably high performers or used to be. Like I have a decent amount of people who like, let's say 5 to 15 years ago were pretty badass. And it's not that they're not badass now. They're still like the fit friend in their friends group. Yeah. But when they go to a class, they want to chase the 25-year-olds. You're like, hey, that might not work. And it's not because they're better than you. Like they bounce a little higher. Their recovery is a little easier. They have, 15 fewer years of wear and tear.
Lord, yes.
And managing that mental load and that kind of mindset is a huge part of it. And sometimes introducing things like this are really useful. Like, well, can you do like 5 gorgeous sit-ups? Okay. Then why would we do 150 with a bunch of dynamic force a little bit out of control? If you can do it slow and gorgeous, then let's have a conversation about it. But as that understanding sinks in, people start having these realizations like you just talked about. Like, oh, I'm not sure if I might not snatch for time ever again. I love snatching, but I might not snatch for time anymore. I could understand that. I could understand that as your goals change and things evolve. It's not that it's wrong, but it might not be the right thing for you right now.
Yes. And from a pelvic health perspective, anybody who is a parent, and I'm going to, obviously people who are birthing are going to have a very different journey than their partners who are not. But both of those people are going to have the exact situation that you just explained. Just inherent to that responsibility. You are going to be an athlete at some level who is looking back and thinking, why can't I do those things that I used to do? And your setup will be entirely different. You will have all these responsibilities and birthday parties on the weekend for kids you don't know. And like all of this stuff that you'll have to take care of, and you'll have to take care of yourself. And so that conversation with patients is hard. It really is. And I know you have it too, where it is just like, how do we stop chasing this version of yourself that, yes, was a great version of yourself, someone you should be proud of, and instead be curious about what is possible now. And I think for me, that in my own training anyway, curiosity has been the thing that has always driven me. And I'm grateful for that, because comparing yourself to someone else, even a past version of yourself, is exhausting and it's unrealistic. And we all kind of have that like come to Jesus moment, I think, where we're like, we are not 20 anymore. We cannot get away with literally everything. But then the question becomes, that doesn't mean we don't still get to have fun with our fitness. That doesn't mean we don't ever PR anything ever again. It just means maybe those things are just going to be different than what you thought before. But tough realization to come to, for sure.
It can be hard, guidance. Even especially for parents, I've found schedule-wise. Like even for the partner who didn't give birth, I've multiple times run into people who are like, I can't get there. I love doing this workout. I have my program that I totally love. It's 4 times a week for 1 hour. It's worked for me for the past 15 years and I haven't done it in 8 months and it's driving me crazy. You're like, okay, that program isn't for you. Like, no, that was my program for 15 years. Anymore. I was like, that was the program for someone who didn't have kids that they were responsible for and were showing up for, and their schedule was changing and their sleep was wacky and their finances were different. And that isn't a thing anymore. Instead of waiting around for a bunch of time to drop into your lap, which is likely never going to happen, why don't we find something that works for you right now? And we can make doing more a goal, or a thing that looks like it a goal. I'm not telling you no, but if it's impossible, sitting around and wishing the impossible thing were possible doesn't end. We're just burning time and opportunity.
Right. This just moves you nowhere. Yeah. And I know you're like this as well, but especially within the world of PT, I am obsessed with the minimum effective dose. Like I don't need to give somebody 7 different things to do if 3 get them where they need to go. And if those things, I have one patient who she's just such an overthinker, and she just will out and tell you a million times that she is. So you know how conventional PT programs, I feel like it's always 3 sets of 10 no matter what. 3 exercises, 3 sets of 10. She gets 2 exercises. And maybe that would drive me crazy in another life. But I'm like, look, if these are getting you out of pain, you know how to do them. I know you're going to do them. I know you're not going to overthink them. Then that's the right dose. And training is the same way. I mean, I remember thinking in order to feel good about my body, good about myself, feel functional in my life, I would have to train 5 times a week, no matter what. And now I'm like, you know what? 3 is really fine. 3 gets me so far. Why would I do more if I could do less and get exactly what I wanted anyway, But it's a hard sell, because you're right that those are patterns that people just get very fixed to, or they wish it was different. I think that's a hard one too. It's they're like, yes, I do love being a parent, But yeah, I wish I had like 3 extra hours on every day to do something for myself. And that is a difficult reality to come to terms with and to try to navigate.
Yeah, it's really, really hard. And if people struggle with that in a bunch of different ways, on the minimum effective dose thing, there's a version of that I've been playing with a few clients lately that I think you might enjoy. And these are the people who want to take itty bitty jumps. So this is sometimes for me, the minimum effective dose is actually being a little more aggressive and a little more intense in limited time. So if I'm looking at a day and be like, all right, we have, I want to get 3 working sets in. And I have a client who loves taking like 2-kilogram jumps. Like we're going to do 40 and 42 and 44 and 46 and 48 and 50. And we're going to rest a couple of minutes between every set. And I start doing like, no, we're 40. Okay, we're going to go to 50. All right, we're going to 58. All right, we're going to 65. I'm like, what are you doing? I was like, you don't have time for this. Those 3 sets we didn't do are a waste of your time. I'm not here to be ineffective or inefficient. Your time is too valuable and we have things to get to. And getting them out of that mindset, they're actually like, oh, later in the workout, I'm feeling much better. I have all this energy and I don't know what's happened. It's like, well, because we didn't do 80 extra sets you didn't care about. In the same way, we're not going to put, the junk volume. We're not going to put extra days and extra movements in just to fill up time and space. If it's not going to be a useful stimuli, just spend your time doing something else.
Yeah. Junk volume is such a terrible problem. I mean, it's a terrible problem from a PT perspective too, because it happens, right? People doing exercises, it doesn't even matter, doesn't even move them forward. Why are we doing this? But especially in the world of weightlifting, like this is a tough concept to try to deliver to people. But if you are low on time, every set should be something that you are thinking about, and it should be something that you're attempting to improve. It should move you forward. And if it's not, then you don't need it. And I was talking to Steve at Philadelphia Barbell about this. Like just when you're short on time, what to maximize, what to prioritize, and, intensity. Intensity is the goal. So if you can do 1 rep at a higher load, but you were supposed to do 5 for a period of life, that's really okay. I think good coaches can guide you in that direction, and clearly you have. But yeah, tough because you feel like you're not doing all the work, right? And that's the feeling that people typically have.
100%.
Yeah.
Checking off more stuff. You just said something that I think is, or referred to something I think is really important in how you work. And that is the idea of it being constantly assessive and progressive. Meaning if you work with someone, you have a session, you do some things together, you assign them some work, they come back. And at some point, in a visit or 2, you're like, this isn't working.
Yeah.
Or it's not working fast enough. We're going to change it. We're not going to keep just giving you these 9 movements because no matter what, 40 years of research, this is what Jefferson will definitely prescribe because these are the 9 movements that are most likely to help. That might be true. They're not helping you. We're going to do something different.
Yeah. It has like 2 faces because obviously it's a really good thing. In my line of practice, if something isn't working, I don't know why we would be doing it. And that's a comfort to a lot of patients who see me after literally being like sent to a corner with, I kid you not, a sheet that is the same thing that somebody else with a shoulder problem got. But it goes the other way too, because I actually think that one of the criticisms of my coaching and programming that I've had to like receive and think through is I like change so much that sometimes I don't let people sit with something long enough to get comfortable, or I don't let people repeat things that could really stand to be repeated. For instance, I really like a 3-week cycle for a lot of my remote clients, but it doesn't always make sense because sometimes in the 3rd week, they're still learning, So I feel like it can go both ways. In the training world, like in the PT world, I feel like it comes across as like just being patient with some things. Obviously always monitoring, like, are we getting closer to our goal? But how you do something really matters. Maybe it's not that we need to change the movement, but maybe we need to look again at how you're doing it. And I see that a lot too, like people getting sent home with PT exercises and then you watch them do it and you're like, well, that has nothing to do with your quad. You know what I mean? And that's like the point of that exercise, but you are not doing it in a way that is actually going to yield any results. So it wasn't the exercise. It was the fact that nobody even watched you do it, But yeah, tough on both sides of that one, I think.
Yeah. And that's, I've certainly had that struggle with lots of people and movements, like, because there's also an element of if someone gets bored with a movement, they're much more likely to move with intention. Therefore, the movement is going to be a little less effective. So sometimes I will switch up like all I care about is working on the single leg strength and balance. And we might do step ups to lateral step ups to Bulgarian split squats to a deficit lunge and I'm basically dressing it up in a few different ways because we have to keep hammering this. But if I have you do 16-inch step ups for the next 24 weeks, we're probably going to lose some intention along the way, depending on the person. I have a few crazy bodybuilders who are like, give me the same things. I'm going to go RP7 to RP 7.5 to RP 8. And those folks are great. They're like, great. Here's the program for the next 10 weeks.
Oh my gosh.
Let me know when you can do one more rep and we'll change everything up.
Yeah, that's wild. I'm like, no, I don't know any of those people.
There's not a lot of them. And I'm certainly not one of them. Not even a little bit. Dr. Erin, I feel like we could do this forever, but I want to be respectful of your time. If people want to work with you, get in touch, etc., how can they find you? How should people reach out?
So I operate out of Open Box Athletics at 19th and Washington in Philadelphia. And the easiest way to find me is to look on Instagram at Erin Lee DPT. So that's ErinLeeDPT, Doctor Physical Therapy. And I tell everybody, just DM me there. I actually keep much better track of my DMs than I do my emails. Don't email me. It's a very sad thing. Don't do it.
That's good. We will not drop the email in the show notes, but we will put the Instagram in the show notes so people can reach out. And I didn't say this earlier, but I have been a patient several times and can't recommend you highly enough.
Thank you, Justin. Well, can't recommend Justin's amazing programming and coaching. Most dependable man in the universe. So there you go. That's myself.
I appreciate that. They're already listening to the podcast. These people like me. I want them to find out about you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Erin.